This week, poetry. Coming up next. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Middle Country Public Library podcast. Sal DiVincenzo here in the studio with my fabulous colleagues, Sarah Fade.
Hello.
Nicole Rambo.
Hello.
How is everyone doing this week?
Great.
Good.
So we're going to jump right in. Since you're both speaking about poetry
Well, it is National Poetry
this week,
Month.
because it is National Poetry Month, amongst other national month things, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Who would like to go first?
I'll go first because I talk a little bit about how it came about and how to read poetry.
How poetry came about?
How poetry itself came about. How
my
Poetry
goodness.
Month. Okay, so there is a website called Academy.
How poetry came about?
What is poetry? Poems. Academy of American Poets.
Mm-hmm.
They have a website. And it's very informative. And they
hope
are
so.
the actual reasoning behind April Poetry Month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So National Poetry Month, like we said, is in April. Launched by the Academy of American Poets in April 1996.
Oh, wow. It's old.
Yeah, well, I was shocked that it wasn't older.
1996.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
It's almost as old as Nicole.
Yeah. I'm older than that. I was 9.
it's a special occasion that celebrates poets' integral role in our culture and that poetry matters. Over the years, it has become the largest literary celebration in the world with tens of millions of readers, students, K through 12 teachers, librarians, booksellers, literary events, curators, publishers, families, and of course, poets, marking poetry's important place in our lives. So that is what National Poetry Month is.
Very nice.
Started in 1996.
1996. So
Okay.
next year is what? The 30th anniversary then?
I guess so.
Wow.
So what is National Poetry Month? We went over that. Who started it? And as we know, it is through the Academy of American Poets.
American poets.
American poets. But it is for all poets.
True.
Why was April chosen?
Oh, yeah.
In coordination with poets, booksellers, librarians, and teachers, the Academy of American Poets chose a month when poetry could be celebrated with the highest level of participation. Yeah, April seems to be the best time within the year to turn attention toward the art of poetry in an ultimate effort to encourage poetry readership year-round.
Okay.
The goals of National Poetry Month are to highlight the extraordinary legacy and ongoing achievement of American poets, encourage the reading of poems, assist teachers in bringing poetry into their classrooms, increase the attention paid to poetry by national and local media,
Oh, okay.
encourage increased publication and distribution of poetry books, and encourage and support for poets and poetry in general.
Nice.
How can I celebrate? And there are thousands of ways to celebrate. The Academy of American Poets developed a list of 30 things to get you started. But I would say, like, just read a poem.
Yeah.
That's one way to do it,
That's
right?
one
Is
way
it
to
that
do
simple?
it.
Is it that simple, Sarah?
I think so. How could librarians become more involved?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Let me know.
The Academy of the AAP, I'm just going to call that,
Yeah.
provides a National Poetry Month tip sheet for librarians, including ideas for book displays, programs, discussions, collection development, outreach, and marketing, as well as success stories from past years. If you're a librarian with a success story you'd like to share, email AAP, and we may post your story on poets.org, which is a
All
website,
right. We
okay?
do have a lot of librarians who watch us.
Yeah.
They're spying on us. They're trying to see what we do. We know who you are.
Oh, I know. Okay, so just so you know, our poet laureate
Yeah, who is the poet laureate?
is Ada Limón. I'm
Okay.
sure we've talked about this before
We might have,
because
yeah.
I thought, foolishly, the poet laureate changed every year.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
It does not. She's been poet laureate for quite some time.
So how does it
They don't
change?
pick-
Do they retire?
They don't pick
or
one every year?
do they retire? How does that work, Sarah?
thought-
do they retire?
Oh, okay.
or-
It says 2 years. So,
oh.
so this year, maybe sometime.
This is
What's
the
her name?
second year.
Ada Limón.
Oh, okay. She has a poem in this book. I'll read
Oh,
that.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit about our poet laureate.
Okay.
She was born on March 28th in 1976 in Sonoma, California. As a child, she was greatly influenced by the visual arts and artists, including her mother, Stacia Brady.
Oh.
Yeah. In 2001, she received an MFA from the creative writing program at NYU.
Oh.
Right.
Limon's first poetry collection, Lucky Wreck, was the winner of the 2005 Autumn House Poetry Prize and selected by Jean Valentine. Her other collections are Startlement, New and Selected Poems, The Hurting Kind, shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize, The Carrying, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award, Bright Dead Things, which was a finalist for the National Book Award.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Sharks in the Rivers and This Big Fake World, winner of the 2005 Pearl Poetry Prize. She is the editor of the anthology You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World. She is also the author of 2 picture books, In Praise of Mystery, with illustrations by Peter Cease, and End, T-O-O, End to the Fox, with illustrations by Gabby D'Alessandro. Yeah.
Cool.
So we do have her work here in the
Okay.
library. The call number is 811.6
That's right.
if you want to check out her works.
Yes, because they put poetry upstairs in the nonfiction section, right?
Yeah, I don't understand that, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So this is one of her poems, and she has very long poems, like 2-pagers.
Oh, wow.
But I chose a short one.
Okay.
Okay, so it's called While Everything Else Was Falling Apart.
You going to read it?
I'm going to read it.
Oh, wow.
And then I'm going to teach you guys how to read a poem, and then we can dissect whether or not I did a good job.
Okay.
Okay. In the Union Square subway station, nearly 15 years ago now, the L train came clanking by, where someone had fat sharpied a black heart. On the yellow pillar you leaned on during a bleak day. Brittle and no notes from anyone you crushed upon. Above ground, the spring sun was the saddest one. Doing work, but also none. What were you wearing? Something hopeful to show the world you hoped? A tall man was learning from a vendor how to pronounce churro. High in the sticky clouds of time, he kept repeating churro while eating a churro. How to say this made you want to live. No hand to hold, still here it was. Someone giving someone comfort and someone memorizing hard how to ask for it again.
I want a churro.
That was the point.
Yes, that was the point.
Okay.
You know, so before you continue,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people might not consider that being quote unquote a poem because most people think a poem is that rhymey kind of like pentameter, blah, 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 and all those fancy words for the sing-songy kind of,
Like children's poems.
my,
so.
yes,
Mother Goosey.
yes, my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But this is,
Yeah. So how to read a poem.
What, spoken word poem?
Yeah. So a lot of times when you, I find when you see a poem, you don't write it. You know, like this one.
Yeah.
And it's not written out. Like, so it was like the middle of the sentence starts on a new sentence,
yes,
right?
uh-huh.
How do you read that? Like, I don't know. Okay. So reading poetry well is part attitude and part technique. Curiosity is a useful attitude, especially when it's free of preconceived ideas about what poetry is or should be. Effective technique directs your curiosity into asking questions, drawing you into a conversation with the poem. The goal of careful reading is often to take up a question of meaning, an interpretive question that has more than one answer. Since the form of a poem is part of its meaning, like the flow, like you were talking about, for example, features such as repetition and rhyme may amplify or extend the meaning of a word or idea, adding emphasis, texture, or dimension. Questions about form and technique, about the observable features of a poem, provide an effective point of entry for interpretation. To ask some of these questions, you'll need to develop a good ear for the musical qualities of language, particularly how sound and rhythm relate to meaning. This approach is one of many ways into a poem. Okay. So I'm not going to read all of the pages, but getting started, prior assumption. Most readers make 3 false assumptions when addressing an unfamiliar poem. The first is assuming that they should understand what they encounter on the first reading, and if they don't, that something is wrong with them or with the poem. Okay?
Isn't that not the same for everything else that you might read?
Yeah,
Right?
and everything. The second is assuming that the poem is a kind of code, that each detail corresponds to one and only one thing, and unless they can crack this code, they've missed the point. Mm-hmm. The third is assuming that the poem can mean anything readers want it to mean. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's not,
Not anything.
Yeah, not anything.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
Literature is and has always been the sharing of experience, the pooling of human understanding about living, loving, and dying. Successful poems welcome you in, revealing ideas that may not have been the foremost in the writer's mind in the moment of composition. The best poetry has a magical quality, a sense of being more than the sum of its parts, and even when it's impossible to articulate the sense, the something more, the power of the poem is left undiminished. Okay, so this is where it is. So reading a poem aloud.
Okay.
All right.
So let's see if you got it right.
I don't think I did. So before you get very far with a poem, you have to read it. In fact, you can learn quite a few things just by looking at it. The title might give you some image or association to start with. Take notes, Nicole, because you're going to be reading, okay? Looking at the poem shape, you can see whether the lines are continuous or broken into groups, or how long the lines are, and so how dense or on a physical level the poem is. You can also see whether it looks like the last poem you read by the same poet, or even a poem by another poet. All of these are good qualities to notice, and then may lead you to a better understanding of the poem in the end. But sooner or later, you're going to have to read the poem, word by word. To begin, read the poem aloud. Read it more than once. Listen to your voice, to the sounds the words make. Do you notice any special effects? Do any of the words rhyme? Is there a cluster of sounds that seem the same or similar? Is there a section of the poem that seems to have a rhythm that's distinct from the rest of the poem? Don't worry about why the poem might use these effects. The first step is to hear what's going on. If you find your own voice distracting, have a friend read the poem to you. Yeah. That said, it can still be uncomfortable to read aloud or to make more than one pass through a poem. Some of this attitude comes from the misconception that we should understand a poem after we first read it, while some stems from sheer embarrassment. Where could I possibly go to read aloud? What if my friends hear me? And then they talk about lines in a poem. Mm-hmm. What determines where a line stops in a poetry? There is, of course, more than one answer to this question. Lines are often determined by meaning, sound and rhythm, breath, or typography. Poets may use several of these elements at the same time. Some poems are metrical in a strict sense. But what if the lines aren't metrical? What if the lines are irregular?
Which we've just illustrated there. I think that was the poem you read was a little irregular, right?
It was, yeah. The relationship between meaning, sound, and movement intended by the poet is sometimes hard to recognize, but there is an interplay between the grammar of a line, the breadth of a line, and the way lines are broken out in this poem. This is called lineation. For example, lines that end with punctuation called end-stopped lines are fairly simple. In that case, the punctuation and the lineation, and perhaps even breathing, coincide to make the reading familiar and even predictable, right? Which is Robert Frost kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But lines that are not end-stop present different challenges for readers because they either end with an incomplete phrase or sentence, or they break before the first punctuation mark is reached. Mm-hmm. The most natural approach is to pay strict attention to the grammar and punctuation. Reading to the end of a phrase or sentence, even if it carries over one or several lines, is the best way to retain the grammatical sense of a poem. But lineation introduces another variable that some poets use to their advantage. For example, Robert Creeley is perhaps best known for breaking lines across expected grammatical pauses. This technique often introduces secondary meaning. Sometimes an ironic contrast with the actual meaning of the complete grammatical phrase. Consider these lines from his poem, The Language. And I'm going to read it like it's written. So, okay. Locate I. Love you some. We're in. Teeth end. Eyes bite. It but. B-U-T.
It but all right.
Yeah. Reading the lines as written, as opposed to their grammatical relationship, yields some strange meanings. Locate I seems to indicate a search for identity. And indeed it may, but the next line, which continues with love you some, seems to make a diminishing statement about a relationship. On its own, I's bite is very disturbing. Hearing Crilly read his poems can be disquieting because he pauses at the end of each line. And you can hear these poems also.
Okay.
Yeah. While poets use techniques drawn from music like jazz, like syncopation, etc., who employ unusually long lines, there may be another guiding principle: breath. Some poets think of their words as music flowing from a horn. They think of phrases the way a saxophonist might. Poems composed in this way have varied line lengths, but they have a musicality in their lineation and a naturalness to their performance. They may have a recognizable sense of measure, an equivalent duration between lines, or for the sake of contrast, one rhythmic pattern or duration that gives way to successive variations. So there's a lot more about poetry.
Yes.
But I will let you guys read it. But they do give you some questions. Ready?
Okay.
No answers, just questions.
Okay.
Who is the speaker? What circumstances give rise to the poem? What situation is presented? Who or what is the audience? What is the tone? What form does a poem take? How is form related to the content? Okay. There's a lot more though. Is sound an important or active element of the poem? Does the poem spring from an identifiable historical moment? Does the poem speak from a specific culture? Does the poem have its own vernacular? Does the poem use imagery to achieve a particular effect? What kind of figurative language, if any, does the poem use? If the poem is a question, what is the answer? If the poem is an answer, what is the question? What does the title suggest? And does the poem use unusual words or use words in an unusual way? So these are some things to think about. They also go over text and context, ambiguity in poems. And that's really it.
It's interesting. It's probably a very good idea to be prepared before you read a poem, especially if you want to get into poems. But at the same time, this is too much work for me.
Well, it is a brain exercise.
Right?
And I do feel like sometimes the poets who write the poems are the best ones to
read them.
read them out loud because they know the flow and everything. Because I'm sure,
Yeah.
Like when Maya Angelou reads her poetry, it's very beautiful. And then when I read it, it's what? Yeah.
But that is one thing that I do enjoy about poetry is that kind of, that unknown that you're walking into when you start to read it and you're like, how is this going to be, set up? How is it going to be structured? And some poems have that like you said, that sing-songy kind of lyrical kind of thing. And others are just like a brick wall.
Yeah, no,
you walk right into it.
I do think there's a poem or a poet for everybody. Yeah. So in honor of April being Poetry Month, take a look at this website, or we have a database on our Middle Country website with poetry and author short story, I think it is.
Yeah.
Database, and you can look at authors and poetry and poems and stuff like that, and find one that speaks to you, and maybe open up your mind a little bit.
There you go.
A little bit of art.
Awesome.
I took a poetry class in college.
Is that like necessary? I think we all have to take poetry classes, right?
Well, I was majoring in English. So.
Oh, well, I hope you would have taken, yes.
Yeah. I don't think I would have taken it if I wasn't majoring in English.
I think it might have been something like a core program for me.
Oh.
But of course, they just closed my school down.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
Nicole, you're also talking about poetry, I assume, from the child standpoint.
We'll go down in age. I'll start with teens.
Okay.
And we'll go down to little ones.
All right.
Because teens are sort of similar to like what Sarah just read. It's a little bit. It could be a little bit less rhymey, a little bit more like spoken word type stuff. So. Same as the 808. There's 808 and 811, or like the two, like in between those are like a lot of the poetry stuff. And in our YA section, we have quite a nice little section. I mean, it's not a ton. Our YA is nonfiction small, but I think we have a good little section for poetry. So this one I pulled called "You Don't Have to Be Everything: Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves," and it's edited by Diana Whitney. And she says, I wanted to collect the voices I wish I'd heard when I was a teen. So that's and then these poems, the one I'll read is from Ada Limón, our poet laureate. But then there's Amanda Gorman, who's a pretty famous poet for especially like because she's very young. Elizabeth Acevedo, she won an award. We got Maya Angelou in here, Margaret Atwood, some names you'll recognize. So and it's like different like sections of like there's like seeking, rage, falling in love, stuff like that. So Ada's is how to triumph like a girl. I like the lady horses best, how they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if the big dangerous animal is also a part of me, that somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body, there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart, giant with power, heavy with blood. Do you want to believe it? No, excuse me. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge beating genius machine that thinks, no, it knows it's going to come in first? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I want a horse heart. So that's one of the ones. Then they're pretty short. But actually, what you're talking about, the shape of like poems. So like that's this one, but the one right next to it is actually like in the shape of like a woman, like a girl.
Oh, that's neat.
So you can see.
They did that nice. Yeah.
So all the poems, and there's some that are like you have to like turn it like this.
Okay.
So yeah, like
Clever.
plays into everything. I did get a B in my poetry class.
Oh, nice.
That's not bad.
That's not bad.
I think I got a B plus. I was told I can't write it, but I'm good at dissecting it. So there you go.
Yeah.
Do it that way you will. There's also, I just recently watched a video. It's like a spoken word thing, and she's a spoken word like poet, but she did a Pitbull song. And but that's another thing for teens. Music is poetry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It
So
is.
like if you are into writing music, definitely look for inspiration in poetry, and vice versa. If you're into poetry, and you have maybe a friend or someone who likes to make music, you can probably turn it into a song if you'd like. So those things definitely go together. So that's another thing for teens to look into. And we do have a program coming up called Teen Jam Session, where you can like read your poetry, or if you have music, or if you play music, you can come down and try it out. It's like you don't have to perform if you don't want to, but you can like workshop it. There'll be someone there like giving you pointers and stuff.
Great.
So that's
awesome
for the teens. And then we'll go to the littler guys. So in years past, because we've talked about National Poetry Month on the podcast before, and I usually talk about Shel Silverstein because I do like him. But there are other poets out there. One is Jack Prelutsky, and he was a children's poet laureate. And he has like a ton of similar silly poems that are like fun to read for kids and their families. So he has a ton, but one book is called My Parents Think I'm Sleeping. And one of the poems in the book is What Happens to the Colors. And this is more the rhyming, right? So what happens to the colors when night replaces day? What turns the wrens to ravens, the trees to shades of gray? Who paints away the garden when the sky's a sea of ink? Who robs the sleeping flowers of their purple and their pink? What makes the midnight clover quiver black upon the lawn? What happens to the colors? What brings them back at dawn? So there you go. It's a cute little poem, again, with the rhyming and like the questions and stuff like that. And then if you have a younger kid who's into maybe writing poem, he also has a book on how to write a poem called Pizza, Pigs, and Poetry. And again, so that's in the 808 spot, and then his book is in the 811 spot, and they'll be the same kind of all that stuff in that section. And similarly, so for these kids, maybe they're a little bit older, but I've talked about on here before literacy, right, early reading, and that's like a big thing. I'll be talking about it more probably because we're building up a collection about it and all that good stuff. But so when you have really little ones, rhyming is one of the first things you're going to do with them talking. So they're pre-readers. So it's like their phonemic awareness, like just learning about sounds. It's all about like rhyming. So some great books for that are Brown Bear, What Do You See? This is a very popular one in my house. Even though every page, when he's reading it by himself, every page is Red Bird, what do you see? No matter what he turns to. That's just his favorite one to say. But when we read it together, he's a little bit better at it. He does call the book Bear, so that's good.
Okay.
So when you're reading it with your child, you'll go, like you'll pick a word that they're learning. Like if they're really little, like my guy, like see and me are the words that we're trying to get him to say, and bear. So you go brown, and then you wait.
Yeah.
And then they say bear. Right? And then you go brown bear, what do you And you wait.
Yeah.
However long you think, wait a couple more seconds. These little babies need time. Their little brains, they need time. My husband used to fill in the answer. I'm like, see, if we know you know the answer, like, let him say it. So you don't have to prove how smart you are to your spouse. They know. They know you know the next word. But it is a skill. Like, slowing yourself down is like hard to do. Another one, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. That was a favorite. I remember when I was in kindergarten, like us having a whole day like devoted to the Chicka Chicka Boom. We built like a big tree in the classroom.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, it was very fun. So those are great. And then we also have over in our parents' collection, we have the complete book of rhymes, songs, poems, finger plays, and chants. So these are all the things you could possibly want to sing and chant.
Looks brand new.
And rhyme with your kids. Yeah, if you have like multiple kids, if you're watching, a bunch of kids at the same time, and little like thumb things and like all that stuff, because that's all part of it. Like the getting like they tap, you start like tapping, and when you're learning all the, like phonemic awareness and sounds and stuff, and that's like pre-reading skills. So there you go. Cool. So we can start with the little ones, and then we go little, and then kind of little, and then older, and then adults, and then you get to Robert Frost and miles to go before I sleep. And apparently he only wrote that twice because he couldn't think of another line. Isn't that like one of the I don't know if it's true, but that's one of the things
Probably
that you hear.
is.
Yeah. Oh, and then I did use ChatGPT to help me today, like always. And
Did you write a poem?
I asked it to write a poem in the style of Shel Silverstein.
All right.
About librarians?
About the podcast.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
All right. There's a podcast at the library. It lives behind a door. A room with mics and headphones and stories by the score. It talks about the books we love and tech and teens and rhyme. It talks about the programs you can come to anytime. It tells you about robots and reading dogs and crafts. And sometimes if you listen close, you'll even hear some laughs. It's hiding in your pocket. It's waiting in your ear. It's right there on your phone, my friend, whenever you want to hear. So if you like to wonder or dream or learn or play, the MCBL podcast has something cool to say.
Oh,
That's fantastic.
next Poet Laureate, ChatGPT. 2-year tenure.
Very good. Well, thank you, Nicole. Yep. I thought it was interesting when you were reading the children's poem that was rhyming. The inflection. You notice her voice changed. The inflection of the voice, nah, which is different than when you read like an adult poem. It's like da 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 da.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, well, that does it for another episode of the podcast. If you want to listen to older episodes or read our show notes, visit our website, mcplpodcast.com, and kindly hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube and hit subscribe, because we greatly appreciate building our audience. It's slowly but surely going up. We would love to get to maybe 2,000 by the end of the year. How about that? How's that sound?
All right.
Sounds good.
Let's try it.
All right, so thank you again for Sarah Fade and Nicole Rambo. I'm Sal DiVincenzo. See you on the next show.